At the age of 14, Isabella wakes up before dawn, while the city is still sleeping. With a carefully arranged basket of candy, she prepares for another day of work on the streets. Your routine starts early, and each step is a reminder of the responsibility you carry on your shoulders. Since the accident that left her father, Ricardo, paraplegic, Isabella has become the main source of income in the house. His large brown eyes carefully watch the movement around, always looking for the best spots to sell his sweets. The world around her is merciless, but she faces every challenge with determination. The absence of his mother, who died in the accident, weighs as much as the basket on his arm. But it is her father's encouraging smile, even full of hidden pain, that makes her move forward. Isabella knows that each candy sold is one more step to keep her little family together. On the streets of the city, Isabella learns early on about the indifference and harshness of the world. With the basket balanced on her arm, she approaches passers-by, many of whom ignore her or pass in a hurry, without noticing the young saleswoman. Some buy out of compassion, others out of pleasure, but most just look away. Isabella doesn't let people's coldness discourage her. She knows she must persist to help her father, who is waiting for her in a wheelchair, eagerly awaiting her return. Every sale is a small win, and every rejection is a reminder of the cruel reality you face. But Isabella, with her upright posture and firm expression, never loses hope. She carries not only the sweets, but also a deep desire for a better future, where she will no longer need to beg for attention or compassion. Despite the harshness of their daily routines, the bond between Isabella and Ricardo is unbreakable. Ricardo, sitting in his wheelchair, watches his daughter with a mixture of pride and sadness. He knows he can't offer much beyond words of encouragement and smiles that often don't reflect the pain he feels. Isabella, in turn, finds strength in the love they share. It is this bond that drives her, day after day, to face the adversities of the streets. At the end of each day, when she returns home, tired, but with a few bucks in her pocket, it is her father's hug that comforts her. They don't have much, but they do have each other, and for Isabella, that's enough to keep fighting. Their resilience is a beacon of hope amid the storms they face, and together, they dream of better days where candy sales will be just a distant reminder of hard times. Before the accident, Ricardo was a man full of life, hardworking and dedicated to his family. Married to Anna, he had in Isabella a cheerful and energetic daughter, and together they formed a happy and united family. Ricardo worked as a mechanic, and every day was an opportunity to build a better future for his family. However, everything changed on a rainy night, when a car accident destroyed this carefully constructed life. Anna lost his life, and Ricardo lost the ability to walk, being confined to a wheelchair. The dreams he had for his family disintegrated in that instant, leaving only fragments of a happiness that seemed unattainable. The memories of his days of strength and autonomy are now a painful shadow that haunts every moment. Ricardo feels that he has failed to protect his family and struggles daily with the feeling of powerlessness. For Ricardo, the wheelchair is more than a physical limitation, it is a constant symbol of the life he has lost. Depending on Isabella for everything from food to basic care, he finds himself trapped in a reality where his daughter is the provider, a role he wished to take on to protect her. Every time he sees her going out to sell candy, a mixture of pride and guilt consumes him. He recognizes the sacrifice she makes, but feels that he should be the one to carry that burden. The relationship with Helena, his mother-in-law, is a constant reminder of his new position. She treats him with coldness and contempt, seeing him as a burden that only gets in the way. Ricardo avoids confrontation, but Helena's constant pressure and harsh words leave deep scars. Each day, he tries to find ways to contribute, however small, to lighten the burden on Isabella, but the feeling of worthlessness is a constant struggle. Despite everything, Ricardo still finds small sparks of hope. These are moments like Isabella's hugs at the end of the day, or the kind words of strangers who buy sweets to help them. He clings to these little lights amid the darkness that often surrounds him. Ricardo dreams of a future where he can repay everything Isabella does for him. He thinks of ways to adapt his skills as a mechanic to a new reality, perhaps repairing small appliances at home. It's a modest plan, but for Ricardo, it represents a possibility of being useful again. He talks to Isabella about his ideas, and she always supports him enthusiastically, reinforcing the strong bond they share. Ricardo knows that the road ahead is difficult, but the love he feels for his daughter and the hope for a better tomorrow are what keep him moving, even without being able to walk. He refuses to give up, because he knows that as long as he has Isabella by his side, there are still reasons to believe. Helena is a constant presence in Isabella and Ricardo's lives, but not in the welcoming sense of a grandmother or mother-in-law. Since the death of her daughter Anna, Helena has become a bitter and demanding woman, who has never hidden her discontent with the new family dynamics. For her, Ricardo is a burden and Isabella, a tool to obtain the little money that sustains the house. Helena sees her granddaughter with calculating eyes, always focused on how much Isabella can bring home at the end of the day. Helena's words are sharp as knives, and her constant criticism weighs on Ricardo and Isabella like a shadow that never dissipates. She rarely shows a gesture of affection, preferring to express her frustration and disappointment with the life she has. For Helena, the sweets sold by Isabella are an obligation, and not a commendable effort to keep the family together. Each day, Helena casts a disapproving look at Isabella when she returns home. If the money is not enough, Helena does not hesitate to scold the girl, saying that she should try harder, that life is hard and that no one will do anything for them if they do not fight to exhaustion. Ricardo, hearing these words, feels helpless, wishing he could protect Isabella from this emotional burden. Helena's criticism often makes Isabella feel inadequate, as if all the effort is not enough to fill her grandmother's emptiness. However, Isabella finds the strength to move on, even when Helena's words hurt her deeply. She pretends not to listen, but the harsh words stay with her, weighing on her heart as she tries to hold on to hope. Isabella knows that Helena also suffers from the loss of Anna, but the way she deals with this pain ends up hurting those around her. Despite Helena's toughness, Isabella maintains a pure heart. She understands that her grandmother is bitter and that her cruelty is an expression of her own suffering, albeit unjust. Isabella chooses to respond kindly whenever possible, offering a smile or doing small tasks to lighten the burden of Helena's housework. For Ricardo, Helena's presence is a constant reminder of his inability to protect his daughter and his own fragility. He tries to keep the peace, but often finds himself in internal conflict, wishing he could say something that would calm Helena's heart without making the situation worse. In moments of silence, Isabella and Ricardo find solace in each other, knowing that, despite the difficulties, their bond is stronger than Helena's criticism. They share dreams and hopes that one day they can live in a more welcoming environment where love is not eclipsed by bitterness. For Isabella, the hope of better days is what makes her resist, and she knows that, as long as she has her father by her side, she can face any storm. On an ordinary sales day, Isabella decided to explore new areas of the city, in search of more customers. The financial district, with its tall buildings and people in suits, seemed like a good bet. With the basket full of sweets, she positioned herself in a strategic corner, watching the hurried coming and going of the people around her. It was then that, in the midst of the crowd, she saw a tall man, dressed in an elegant suit, walking confidently. What caught his attention the most was the striking resemblance between him and his father, Ricardo. With her heart racing and an uncontrollable curiosity, Isabella began to follow the man, keeping a safe distance. He entered a luxury hotel, a place she would never have imagined stepping foot in. The hotel's facade, with its gilded details and gleaming windows, felt like a distant world that Isabella was a part of. Determined to find out more, Isabella waited a few minutes before entering the hotel lobby. The atmosphere was opulent, with crystal chandeliers, leather furniture and an air of exclusivity that made Isabella feel out of place. She approached the reception, where a well-dressed woman looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and warmth. Nervously, Isabella asked about the man who had just entered. Mr. Fernandez, the receptionist replied with a smile. He owns this hotel. Isabella's world seemed to spin for a moment. The man wasn't just a guest or someone important, he was the owner of the hotel. She quickly thanked him and left, her mind spinning with 1,000 questions. Who was this man who looked so much like his father? And how did he fit into Ricardo's story? In the days that followed, Isabella couldn't get the man she had seen in the hotel out of her mind. The resemblance to Ricardo was too disturbing to be a mere coincidence. Determined to find out more, she returned to the hotel on several occasions, discreetly observing the movement and hoping to see the man again. Finally, after a few days of waiting, she saw him leaving the hotel. Gathering all the courage she had, Isabella decided to approach him. Mr. Fernandez, can I talk to you for a moment? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. The man stopped and looked at her curiously, beckoning her to continue. Isabella, struggling to remain calm, quickly explained her situation, mentioning her father and the difficult life they led. Marcos Fernandez, the hotel's elegant man, listened in silence, visibly intrigued. When Isabella mentioned Ricardo's name, something seemed to change on Mark's face. He invited Isabella to a nearby cafe, suggesting that there was much more to this story than she imagined. This meeting marked the beginning of a journey that would bring unexpected answers and changes for Isabella and Ricardo. After the first contact at the hotel, Marcos and Isabella arranged a meeting so that Ricardo could meet the mysterious man. Marcos, curious and cautious, agreed to meet them in a discreet cafe, away from the prying eyes of the hotel. When Ricardo arrived, pushed by Isabella, his eyes met Marcos's and, for a moment, time seemed to stop. The resemblance between the two was undeniable. Marcos, wasting no time, began to share pieces of his own story, revealing that he had been adopted as a baby and that he always knew he had a lost twin brother. He described the searches he made over the years, trying to find the biological family he never knew. Ricardo, surprised, began to connect the dots and realized that Marcos's story fit with what he knew about his own past. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected a life he had never lived. Ricardo listened intently as Marcos detailed his findings, including records and documents that pointed to a mix-up in the hospital on the day of his birth. Marcos explained that his biological mother, Sofia, always believed that there was something wrong with the story, that one of the twins did not survive. As he spoke, emotion took over Marcos, who still did not believe he was so close to unraveling the mystery of his life. Ricardo, on the other hand, felt a mixture of anger and sadness when he remembered his mother-in-law, Helena, who never mentioned any details about a possible adoption. Ricardo, who had always had suspicions about his past, now saw all his doubts take shape. It was hard for him to accept that his life could have been different if he hadn't been separated from his brother. Isabella, next to Ricardo, held her father's hand, feeling the growing tension in the air. She knew that moment would change everything. With all the cards on the table, Ricardo and Marcos looked at each other, both thrilled with the possibility of finally reuniting their separate lives. Marcos suggested that they take a DNA test to officially confirm what they already felt in their hearts. Ricardo agreed, aware that, regardless of the result, the mere fact that they had met was already a miracle. They scheduled the test for the next day, anxious and nervous with the expectation of what the future would hold for them. Marcos, sensing a new bond form, promised Ricardo and Isabella that, regardless of what happened, he would be there to help. He offered financial and emotional support, proposing to help Isabella get away from Helena's pressure and open up new opportunities for Ricardo. Marcos's promise lit a new flame of hope in Ricardo, who, for the first time in many years, saw a glimpse of a future where he would not only be a burden, but could start over and give Isabella the life she deserved. With tears in his eyes, Ricardo thanked Marcos, and in that cafe, they sealed a pact of brotherhood and renewal. The day of the DNA test arrived with a mixture of anxiety and hope. Ricardo, Isabella and Marcos met in the laboratory, accompanied by the silence that filled the environment with an almost palpable tension. As they waited, Richard couldn't help but think about how his life might have been different. The pain of being separated from his twin brother and a mother he had never met hit him hard. Marcos, on the other hand, was full of anticipation. He had spent years searching for his lost brother, and now, he was about to confirm the truth he had always believed. Isabella, holding her father's hand, felt torn between the relief of having found a new family and the fear of what it would mean for the future she knew. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the coach called them to deliver the results. With trembling hands, Marcos opened the envelope, and everyone's eyes were fixed on the confirmation that would finally unite them. The results confirmed what everyone already felt: Ricardo and Marcos were really twin brothers. Emotion took over the small group. Ricardo felt a mixture of relief and sadness, thinking about the years he had lost with his brother and the life he could have had. He looked at Mark, who was visibly moved, and for the first time in a long time, Ricardo felt that he was no longer alone. For Mark, the confirmation brought a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. He had spent his whole life searching for Ricardo, and now, finally, the hole he felt inside him was beginning to close. Isabella, moved, wiped her tears, feeling connected to a family that was more than blood ties. It was a family that struggled to find itself against all odds. The revealed truth did not erase the years of separation, but it opened the door to a future together. With the truth finally known, Ricardo and Marcos began to plan for the future. Marcos insisted that Ricardo and Isabella move to a more comfortable place, away from Helena's criticism and demands. He offered an apartment near the hotel, where Ricardo could start contributing his skills as a consultant on accessibility projects, something Marcos was implementing in his business. Ricardo, touched by Marcos's generosity, hesitated to accept so much help, but the idea of providing a better life for Isabella motivated him to move forward. Isabella, for her part, was excited about the prospect of a new home and the possibilities that would come with it. She dreamed of going back to school and building a future where she could help her father in even greater ways. The three, united now by more than fate, decided that they would face the future together, with the promise of never letting life separate them again. They knew that the path would not be easy, but for the first time, they had each other to support and build a new history. After the revelation of the DNA test, Ricardo, Marcos and Isabella knew they needed to face Helena. They returned home with the results in hand, ready to confront her and seek answers about what really happened in the past. Helena, sitting in the living room with her usual expression of disdain, was not prepared for what was to come. When Ricardo presented the DNA results, revealing that he had a lost twin brother, Helena reacted with a mixture of denial and anger. She tried to downplay the significance of the discovery, but the truth was already exposed. Ricardo demanded to know why she hid it from him for so many years, why she never mentioned that he had a brother. With a cutting coldness, Helena admitted that she knew of Marcos's existence, but decided to separate them so that she could raise Ricardo as her own son, taking advantage of the confusion in the hospital on the day of the birth. Ricardo, overcome by a sense of betrayal and indignation, realized that Helena's decisions were not only selfish, but also deeply damaging to everyone involved. The revelation about Helena's actions created a definitive rift between her and Ricardo. Tired of being treated as a burden and seeing Isabella endure constant criticism, Ricardo decided it was time to move on without Helena's negative influence. With Marcos's support, Ricardo packed his things and, together with Isabella, left the house that for so long was a place of pain and frustration. Helena, watching them leave, kept her expression of disdain, but inside, perhaps she knew that she was missing the last call with her deceased daughter. Ricardo and Isabella, although sad to leave behind part of their history, felt relieved to free themselves from the toxic environment that Helena perpetuated. The change was not only physical, but also emotional. It was a step towards freedom and the construction of a new life. Ricardo knew that this decision was necessary so that he and Isabella could finally find peace and happiness. With Marcos's support, Ricardo and Isabella moved to the new apartment near the hotel. It was a modest space, but well equipped and adapted to Ricardo's needs. For the first time in years, Ricardo felt he could breathe a sigh of relief. The feeling of being in a safe place, without Helena's critical eyes, brought a comfort that he had almost forgotten existed. Isabella, exploring the new home, was already making plans to decorate the room, imagining a space that reflected her personality and her hopes for the future. That first night, as they lay down in their beds, Ricardo and Isabella talked about the dreams they had kept for so long. Ricardo talked about his ideas for working with Marcos on accessibility projects, while Isabella expressed her desire to go back to school and pursue a career where she could help others, as she always wanted. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, they had a horizon of possibilities before them. United, Ricardo, Isabella and Marcos committed to face the challenges together, with the promise of never letting circumstances separate them again. With the result of the DNA test confirming that Ricardo and Marcos are brothers, a new chapter has opened for both. The feelings of loss and separation that had haunted Ricardo for years began to be replaced by a sense of belonging. Marcos, in turn, felt that he had finally found the missing piece in his life. They decided that, to mark this new beginning, they would have a family celebration dinner, including Isabella, who already felt an integral part of this reunion. That night, between laughter and shared stories, Ricardo and Marcos sealed their commitment to let nothing separate them again. The connection between them was palpable, a bond that time and adversity could not break. While toasting to the new phase, the three of them, together, envisioned a future where the family, although late, was complete and united. With the confirmation that they are brothers, Ricardo and Marcos began to make concrete plans for the future. Marcos, with his success in business, offered Ricardo an opportunity to work alongside him, not only as a consultant in accessibility, but as a true partner in new projects that could positively impact the lives of many people. Ricardo, thrilled with the proposal, saw it as a chance to rebuild his life and finally feel useful and valued. Isabella, always by her father's side, was also included in the plans. Mark suggested that she return to school, offering to pay for her studies and ensure that she had all the opportunities that had previously been denied her. Ricardo, initially reluctant to accept so much help, realized that this was a path not only for him, but especially for Isabella, who sacrificed so much for them. With a new purpose, they began to trace the first steps of a journey that promised to be full of challenges, but also of achievements. Although the future looked more promising, Ricardo still bore the scars of the past. The memories of Anna and the difficult years with Helena still weighed on her mind. In conversations with Marcos, Ricardo opened up about his pain, something he rarely did, even with Isabella. Mark, who also had his own wounds, deeply understood what Ricardo was going through. The brothers decided that they needed to find a way together to honor the past without letting it define the future. Mark suggested that they visit Anne's grave, something Richard had avoided since her death. With Isabella by his side, Ricardo finally found the courage to go, taking flowers and his most cherished memories. In front of the tombstone, Ricardo promised Anna that he would take care of Isabella and that, with Marcos's help, he would find a way to move forward. The moment was a milestone of overcoming for Ricardo, who felt a weight being lifted from his shoulders. With Marcos and Isabella by his side, he knew that while the past could never be changed, the future was in his hands. After the revealing confrontation with Helena, Ricardo and Marcos decided that they could not let the past remain unconsequenced. Helena not only separated the siblings, but also built a web of lies that deeply affected their lives. Ricardo, initially reluctant, wondered if it would be fair to expose Helena to legal proceedings, but Marcos argued that her actions could not be ignored. Isabella, a witness to her father's silent suffering for so many years, supported the decision. It was time to confront Helena in a way that would ensure that her actions were not swept under the rug. They sought out a renowned attorney, Dr. Ramirez, who listened to the story carefully and pledged to help them seek justice. Ricardo knew that this would not erase the past, but he felt that it was a way to finally put an end to the oppressive control that Helena had over their lives. With the process started, the tension between Ricardo and Helena reached its peak. Helena, who has always refused to show remorse, was confronted for the first time in an official way. Upon receiving the legal notification, she tried to minimize the situation, accusing Ricardo and Marcos of ingratitude and insisting that everything she did was for Ricardo's good. But the evidence spoke for itself. The documentation that Marcos was able to gather about the circumstances of the forced adoption and the testimony of the twins' biological mother, Sofia, were enough to expose Helena's lies. In court, Helena maintained a haughty posture, but for the first time, her words seemed empty. Ricardo, with Isabella by his side, talked about the pain that the separation caused and how it affected his entire life. He did not seek revenge, but rather recognition of the truth and the chance to finally move on without the shadows of the past. The trial culminated in a favorable decision for Ricardo and Marcos. Helena was held accountable for her actions, and the court ruled that she should comply with corrective measures and offer financial reparation, even though Ricardo knew that nothing could really make up for the lost years. More than the judicial victory, the process was a catharsis for Ricardo. He felt that, by facing Helena, he was also facing his own insecurities and the feeling of powerlessness that had accompanied him since the accident. Isabella, seeing her father raise his head after years of submission, felt a renewal of hope. Marcos, always by their side, reinforced his commitment to support the newfound family. With justice done, Ricardo, Marcos and Isabella began to see the future with new eyes. There was no longer any need to look back with regret. Now, every step was an affirmation that they were in control of their own lives, ready to build a new legacy based on truth and solidarity. After the confrontation with Helena and the closure of the legal process, Ricardo, Isabella and Marcos began to put into practice the plans for a new beginning. Marcos, true to his word, provided a comfortable apartment for Ricardo and Isabella, close to the hotel where he worked. The move represented more than just a new address, it was a symbol of freedom and renewal. Ricardo, sitting in his wheelchair, watched as Isabella organized the new space with enthusiasm, placing photos and objects they brought from the old house. For Ricardo, every detail of that apartment was a reminder that they were finally free to live without the constant weight of Helena's criticism. The first night in the new home was celebrated with a simple but meaningful dinner. Ricardo, Marcos and Isabella toasted to the future, savoring the peace and hope that this place offered. With Marcos's help, Ricardo began to explore job opportunities that not only respected his physical limitations, but also valued his abilities. Marcos introduced Ricardo to the world of accessibility consulting, an area where his life experience as a paraplegic could really make a difference. Ricardo dedicated himself to learning about the norms and best practices for adapting public and private spaces, with the aim of making them more inclusive. He began collaborating on projects for Marcos's hotel, suggesting improvements that could benefit guests with reduced mobility. For the first time in years, Ricardo felt he was contributing in a meaningful way. The feeling of being useful and productive brought new vigor to Ricardo, who dedicated himself enthusiastically to work, dreaming of expanding his activities and helping other people in the same situation. Isabella, always by her father's side, felt proud to see the sparkle return to Ricardo's eyes. While Ricardo got involved with his new projects, Isabella also began to tread a new path. With Marcos's financial support, she went back to school, enrolling in a private school that offered a more welcoming environment and opportunities she never imagined she had. Isabella quickly stood out, showing a natural talent for the sciences and a deep interest in medicine, inspired by the desire to help others as she always helped her father. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, and with the encouragement of Ricardo and Marcos, that dream began to seem achievable. Student life brought new challenges, but also joys and friendships that Isabella had never experienced before. Each day was a new opportunity to learn and grow, and she embraced each moment with the determination that had always characterized her. Richard and Mark, watching their progress, couldn't be prouder. For them, seeing Isabella flourish was the greatest reward of all the struggles they faced. Although moving into the new apartment brought relief and hope, Ricardo and Isabella soon realized that adapting to their new life would not be as simple as they imagined. Ricardo, accustomed to a routine of limitations and constant challenges, now found himself in an environment that demanded a different posture from him. The responsibility of contributing to Marcos's projects was a source of satisfaction, but also of pressure. Ricardo felt the need to prove that he was capable, that he could make a difference. At times, he found himself struggling with new technologies and processes, feeling out of place in a world that has changed so much since he became a paraplegic. However, with Marcos's patience and support, Ricardo began to familiarize himself with his new responsibilities. He learned to value his daily achievements, recognizing that every step, no matter how small, was significant progress. For Isabella, going back to school was a mixture of joy and challenge. Despite being in a better environment, she faced the difficulty of integrating into a group of colleagues who came from completely different realities from hers. While many of her new friends had stories of travel and comfort living, Isabella carried in her luggage the days of street sales and the constant need to fight for survival. This difference sometimes made her feel like an outsider, trying to balance gratitude for the opportunities she now had with the weight of her past. However, Isabella's determination to excel in her studies and pursue her dream of being a doctor drove her. She dedicated extra hours to her studies, knowing that the road would be long, but believing that, with effort and persistence, she could overcome any barrier. Despite the challenges, Ricardo and Isabella found solace in each other and in Marcos, who increasingly became a father figure and a pillar of support. The nights in the new house were often filled with long conversations where they shared their difficulties, doubts, and hopes. Marcos, with his experience and patience, always found a way to cheer them up, reinforcing the importance of continuing to move forward, even if the steps were small. Ricardo, in turn, made a point of recognizing Isabella's efforts, encouraging her to never give up. They found strength in the unity they built, knowing that together they could face any adversity. This new phase also brought moments of leisure, something that Ricardo and Isabella rarely experienced before. Walks in the park, simple dinners, and even plans for small trips began to be part of their lives. These experiences not only strengthened their bonds but also solidified the certainty that, despite the challenges, they were on the right path to a full and happy life. After months of adaptation and new challenges, Marcos revealed to Ricardo and Isabella that he had managed to locate Sofia, the biological mother of the siblings. Marcos learned from a private investigator that Sofia lived in a nearby town, in modest conditions, but with her heart still full of hope that one day she would be reunited with her children. The news took Ricardo by surprise. For many years, he avoided thinking about his origin, convinced that he would never know the truth about his family. Now, the opportunity to meet her mother has brought up a mix of emotions, excitement, fear, and a deep need for answers. Marcos suggested that the meeting be discreet and intimate, to give everyone a chance to process the emotions involved. Ricardo, with Isabella's support, decided he was ready to finally meet the woman he had lost as much as he did. On the appointed day, Ricardo, Marcos and Isabella traveled to Sofia's house, a small and cozy house surrounded by a well-kept garden. When they arrived, Sofia was waiting for them with an expression that mixed anxiety and hope. Upon seeing Ricardo, Sofia's tears began to roll before any words could be spoken. Ricardo, moved, approached and hugged her, feeling for the first time the warmth of a mother who, despite the circumstances, never stopped loving him. Marcos also approached, completing the family hug that had taken so long to happen. Sofia told how, after the birth of the twins, she was told that one of the babies had not survived, but she always felt in her heart that this was not true. The years of searching and unsuccessful attempts to find Richard did not diminish her love, and now, finally, she had her 2 children by her side. Isabella, observing the scene, felt part of that new family, thrilled to see Ricardo find a piece of himself that had been missing for so long. After the reunion, Ricardo and Sofia spent hours talking, sharing stories and trying to fill in the gaps of the lost years. Sofia told about her life and the difficulties she faced, while Ricardo shared the struggles and victories that marked his path. Mark, light-hearted, felt that he had finally fulfilled his promise to reunite his family. Isabella, sitting next to Ricardo, felt more connected than ever, watching her father find the strength and peace he was looking for. Sofia, delighted with Isabella, saw in her a reflection of the resilience and kindness that she always believed to be present in her children. The days that followed the reunion were dedicated to strengthening these new ties. Ricardo and Marcos made sure to include Sofia in their lives, visiting her regularly and sharing the small and big moments. For Ricardo, each visit was an opportunity to make up for some lost time, while for Sofia, it was confirmation that his family, albeit late, was finally complete. United by a painful past, but ready for a future of hope, they knew that together they could overcome anything. With the presence of Sofia in their lives, Ricardo, Marcos and Isabella began to create a new family routine that mixed the dreams of each one with the reality they built together. Ricardo and Sofia, now closer than ever, spent hours talking about the past and sharing stories that once seemed to belong to different worlds. Isabella, always observant and sensitive, absorbed these stories as life lessons, understanding even more the roots of her family. Marcos, always the pillar of support, facilitated regular meetings in his mansion, where everyone could meet without worries. These meetings became a central point for strengthening bonds, where, between laughter and discussions about the future, they found comfort in each other's company. The feeling of finally belonging to a complete family was something that Ricardo and Marcos deeply valued, and for Isabella, these moments were proof that the sacrifices were worth it. Over time, conversations about the future have become more frequent. Ricardo, increasingly confident in his role in accessibility consulting, began to expand his ideas. He and Marcos discussed the possibility of opening a small company focused on adapting public spaces for people with special needs. Marcos, always willing to support, offered the resources and know-how necessary to turn the idea into reality. Ricardo, inspired by the new phase of his life and the possibility of making a difference, dove headlong into the project. Isabella, in turn, advanced in her studies with determination, now more than ever motivated by the example of overcoming her father and uncle. She decided that she wanted to specialize in geriatric medicine, inspired by living with Helena and the desire to help elderly people have a better quality of life. Sofia, as she watched her children and granddaughters' plans unfold, felt fulfilled, knowing that despite all the time wasted, their lives were heading towards something positive and meaningful. As plans for the future took shape, the family also learned to celebrate the small victories of everyday life. From a compliment on Ricardo's work to Isabella's good grades at school, each achievement was cause for celebration. Marcos, who has always been used to success, has rediscovered the value of simple things, such as a family dinner or an afternoon of laughter in the park. He was actively involved in Ricardo and Isabella's lives, not only as a brother and uncle, but as a true life partner. The difficulties did not disappear completely, adjustments still needed to be made, and the past left marks that still appeared from time to time. However, now, with a close-knit family and the unconditional support of each one, the adversities seemed less daunting. With each new step, Ricardo felt that he was not only rebuilding his life, but also building a legacy for Isabella. For him, the real victory was in seeing his daughter smile with a light heart, without the shadows of the past that had haunted them so much. United by love, resilience and a common desire to start over, Ricardo, Marcos, Isabella and Sofia looked to the future with confidence, certain that together they could achieve anything. Even with the promising future, Ricardo still felt the weight of the memories of Anna, his wife and Isabella's mother. Her loss was not something he could easily forget, and the moments of happiness with the now complete family were often accompanied by a twinge of longing. Determined to honor Anna's memory, Ricardo began to attend the cemetery more regularly, taking Isabella and Sofia with him. These visits became a ritual of connection, where they shared stories about Anna and reflected on how she had been the force that brought them together, even after her death. Sofia, who had never had the chance to meet Anna, felt grateful to be able to participate in these moments, learning about the woman who had been such an essential part of Ricardo's life. For Isabella, these visits were a way to keep the memory of her mother alive and to reaffirm her commitment to move forward, with love and gratitude. As Ricardo and Isabella moved on, the impact of Helena's choices still hung over them. Although they had physically distanced themselves from her, Helena's actions continued to affect their lives emotionally. Ricardo, in particular, struggled to forgive his mother-in-law, knowing that resentment could prevent him from moving forward fully. Over time, he sought support in therapies and deep conversations with Marcos and Sofia, which encouraged him to find a way to leave the past behind without letting it define his present. Isabella also faced her own challenges in relation to Helena. Growing up under her grandmother's sternness, she learned to be resilient, but she also carried emotional scars that were still healing. Gradually, she began to realize that overcoming the difficulties of the past did not mean forgetting, but rather learning to live with the lessons that these experiences brought. The journey of overcoming the past has brought significant growth for everyone. Ricardo, with the help of Mark, found ways to channel his pain into something productive. He began attending lectures and support groups for people with physical disabilities, using his story to inspire and help others facing similar challenges. Marcos, meanwhile, continued to be a constant source of support, utilizing his business expertise to help Ricardo officially launch the accessibility consulting firm, which quickly began to gain recognition for its social contributions. Isabella, with the unwavering support of her family, continued to excel in her studies, getting closer and closer to fulfilling her dream of becoming a doctor. The collective strength of the family became their greatest advantage, showing that, even in adversity, they were capable of transforming pain into purpose. United, they learned that the past could be a source of strength, not just a weight to be carried. With love, patience and mutual support, Ricardo, Marcos, Isabella and Sofia continued to grow and build a life where the future was full of possibilities. After months of preparation and hard work, Ricardo and Marcos finally officially opened the Accessibility Consulting Company, a dream that seemed distant during the years of struggle and uncertainty. The inauguration ceremony was a simple but meaningful event. Family, friends and business partners gathered to celebrate this new stage. Ricardo, in his speech, spoke about the journey that led him there, highlighting the importance of never giving up, regardless of the obstacles. He made a point of thanking Marcos, Sofia and, especially, Isabella, whose strength and dedication inspired him to move forward. For Ricardo, seeing the company become a reality was more than a professional success, it was proof that he had found a new purpose and a way to give back all that he received. Standing ovation, Ricardo felt more alive and fulfilled than ever. While Ricardo advanced in his career, Isabella took the first concrete steps towards his dream. After a lot of effort and dedication, she got a scholarship to one of the best medical schools in the city. The first day of school was a milestone not only for her, but for the whole family. Ricardo and Sofia accompanied her to campus, watching proudly as Isabella entered the building that symbolized so much of her hopes and dreams. Marcos, who could not be present due to work commitments, sent a message full of encouragement and promises to celebrate as soon as possible. For Isabella, that day was a mixture of nervousness and enthusiasm. She knew the challenges would be great, but she was ready to face them, motivated not only by her desire to become a doctor but also by the example of resilience she saw in her own family. Ricardo, when he saw his daughter start her journey, felt a deep joy, knowing that every sacrifice was worth it. To mark all the achievements and the path they took together, Marcos organized a special dinner at his mansion, bringing together Ricardo, Isabella, Sofia and close friends. The evening was a celebration of the family they had become, despite all the hardships and pain they faced. Between laughter, toasts and shared memories, they reflected on how much they had grown and learned. Sophia, her eyes shining with happiness, expressed her gratitude for finally having her family reunited, something she feared she would never see. Ricardo, holding Isabella's hand, spoke about the importance of love and perseverance. Marcos, ever the visionary, proposed a toast to the future, highlighting that regardless of the challenges that might still arise, they would be ready to face them together. For Isabella, that night symbolized the end of a cycle of struggle and the beginning of a new chapter full of possibilities. United, Ricardo, Marcos, Isabella and Sophia felt that they had finally found the true meaning of family.